welcome to Everyday Moodlings. I'm your host, Jerry Parks, and in this video we're going to talk about how to make watercolor prints. So in my last couple of videos that I've done, I've talked about Gelli plates and making Gelli Plate prints, and I am kind of obsessed with them. I have this thing about I like the randomness that they create in a print, rather than, you know, if I was just to sit down to create a background. I feel like sometimes I can get too structured, and I don't like that look. I like it to be random. So the Gelli Plate is great for that. You can kind of come up with all kinds of interesting textures and images, and just a fun product to work with. So if you're watching this on YouTube, obviously you can go to my other videos and see the Gelli Plate videos. If you're on the blog, there's a link to some of the other videos as well. One of the things I talked about last time is using paper stencils that I made via the Cricut, but you can make them on any die cut machine. So I'm sorry, electronic die cut machine. So if you have the Silhouette, you can make them there as well. And I said I was going to show you how to use the same paper stencils to make watercolor prints. So that is what we're going to do today. So this is one of the prints I made. Now my paper is a little bit big for what I'm using for the printmaking, but the paper we use today I'm going to cut down so it'll cover the entire piece. But look how awesome that is. And I'm going to show you the process how to make this. I have no idea how else you would achieve this result, and I just love how they turn out. So this is one I created. This is another one. I actually really like it over here where it's kind of faded away. Okay, so I have a tag template because I make a lot of tag art, and then I can just kind of move it around to see where I might want to place it. And I really love kind of that moving from the splotchy to the more filled in. I have one more for you. And then of course, as we work with it, we're going to color the stencils as well. So these are awesome to use on, cut up and use on other projects. In fact, my last quote of the month project from January, I used a piece of one of these stencils, so I'll link to that as well. So this print was created using this stencil here. So what do we need to make these? I'm going to show you a couple of different ways to do this. You're going to need some kind of non-porous surface to use as to make the print. Basically the watercolor ink or spray ink is going to go on here, or liquid is going to go on here, just like it would on the Gelli Plate. Now, for the most part with the Gelli Plate, that is only used with paint. I did reference a few articles, or I did research a few articles using spray ink on it, but they did say that it often stains the Gelli Plate, so I went with a totally different option. This is just a piece of plexiglass or plastic that you can buy at any craft store. They're super cheap. I think I got a 3-pack or something for 10 bucks, and it was cheap. You probably could also do it directly on your craft mat, but I like having more of a defined size, so I know my work surface is going to be, but you could do it either way. You just need a non-porous work surface. So you're going to need some watercolor paper for this. I would not recommend just using cardstock. Water is really hard on cardstock because it's so porous. It starts to degrade the fibers. But we are going to be using cardstock for our stencils. So I just wouldn't do it on the actual print. You could. It's going to take a long time to dry. These stencils take a long time to dry. So I kind of cut the paper down a little bit to make it easier to work with. So I'm going to show you how to do the prints. So you obviously need watercolor paper. You need some kind of stencil. This does not work all that well with a plastic stencil So you're going to need something paper-wise. You can also just use regular die cuts. This is a Spellbinders die cut, and I'll use those too as we go through this process. So, or you could use hearts. Here's one that I did where I used a heart as my stencil, or a mask really. So so then for our color agent, I am going to use two. We're going to go back to those Color Burst pigment powders, but I'm also going to show you how to just do it with regular spray ink. You can also do it with watercolor paint. As you'll see as we go through this process, you need a lot of water. You really need it to be really saturated in order for this to work. So I'm going to show you how to do it just on regular watercolor paper, and then I'm also going to show you how to do it inside a art journal. And this is the process is a slightly different, and you'll understand more as we go along. This one was done with a stencil, and this one is just more of a mask. And I actually really like this one better. I like that you've got this big splotch here that all filled in, and this not so much. So I'll show you how to do that as well. The process is just slightly different. Okay, so we're going to start out with this particular stencil and our watercolor paper. And to get started, oh, and last but not least, you're going to need a paintbrush to kind of move it around on our board or plastic here, because it's going to want to bead up on you. Now in the past we did one video on these Color Burst pigments. These are beautiful to work with. I love this Merlot. It's such a fabulous color. It's really dark and deep. That's on the page I just showed you. These are the two colors I used. So that's the Merlot in there. So really, really pretty. So now like I said, you need a lot of water here. And then we're going to take this paintbrush, and this is just a crappy old paintbrush. I'm just trying to move the color around because you can see it's really beaded up in the area that it is. And I try not to mix my colors too much, although they will mix as we go about this process. Now at this point, we can add in some other things. If I can add in some clear shimmer mist. This is just a handmade bottle, but you're looking for the clear one. And you could use, if you decide to use spray ink, you can use the glimmer mist. You just need to make sure that whatever you're using won't dry too fast. You need some time here. And I'm adding in some smooch ink actually to give it a little bit, give myself some shimmer in there. So that's a fun way to accent it. So now I'm going to put down my stencil. And now I'm going to put down my paper. Now this is no special watercolor paper. It's Canson. I probably bought it at Hobby Lobby for 40% off or half off. And we're going to let it sit on here for a little bit. What you want to start seeing is that it's coming through the back side. Mostly that you start to see that stencil through the back side of it. Now that created just a really light transfer for us. To get the more complete one, you're going to need a lot more water. So let's go back and let's add in a lot of water. And let's add in a little bit more pigment. And now be careful with your paintbrush this time, because this paper stencil is probably very wet at this point. So again, we're going to put this down and let it soak up. Now it's going to take a little bit for it to soak it up because it's watercolor paper and it's designed to kind of resist that. It's not as absorbent as cardstock. So, but you'll see we get a lot, we're getting a lot of transfer through here, and that's what I'm looking for. That's how I know I got it nice and wet on the other side. And now we get a much more artistic look here, and we can move the paper around. I can actually, at this point, if I want to get even more movement from it, I can spray it. And as long as I'm careful, I'm not going to really lose the image of that stencil. I'm just going to get some interesting water movement. So, that's how you make a watercolor print using a paper stencil. Now this paper stencil on here is going to be awesome too. You have to be really careful with it because it's very, very wet. But look how pretty that is. So now I need to set that off to the side. I'm going to set that off to the side, let it dry. Okay, so I put my stencil aside. Now we still have all this lovely ink on here, color. So we can take a tag and run it through there and pick up some of that color. I could actually wet this all down again and do another print, but I also want to show you how to use spray ink doing the same thing. So at this point you're going to want to get this really clean before you add in more color. That way we won't intermix them. Okay, so in this one we're going to use some spray ink, and I'm using the Tim Holtz spray ink. You want to make sure that you also clean out your paintbrush. Now, this, while it is already liquid, obviously, I'm going to be adding in some more water to it because I want it to be really, really juicy. And you can choose again to kind of move that around a little bit. This stencil will go all the way to the edge, so I want to make sure I get good coverage. And again, if I want to, I can add in some smooch ink or other pearlized ink or spray ink. Just adding that in. Again, want it to be super juicy. Otherwise, I'm not going to get the effect that I want. Lay that down. And we're going to use our watercolor paper. And again, if you feel like it's not coming through well enough, just add more water to it. Add more ink until you kind of get the look that you're going for. There, now that's a pretty faint look again, so we can come back in here, like I said, add in a little bit more. Always more water. And put our print back down. I did finally pull out the brayer and run it back over here. I love, like I said, I love the randomness of it. I never quite know what I'm going to get, what's going to come up with it, how saturated it's going to be. It kind of fades in and out. To me, this is just a beautiful background. And as I've said many times, my projects start with a background and usually a quote of some sort, something I'm trying to convey in a piece. And I like my backgrounds to be random. And that's just, you know, the starting point for however I feel I can best express the idea that I'm trying to get across. So, love the swirls in this one, how they kind of come together there. And again, we have a super cool stencil that we can work with here. Love the stencil. So, you know, as I've already stated in here, one of the things that I love about this process is I know of no other way to get a look that looks like this than this process. Really creates a unique print that you can use and a stencil. So I'm going to set these aside, and then I'm going to show you how to do that journal page as well. Okay, I also wanted to show you real quickly how to do a watercolor print in your art journal. The process is a little different simply because you don't want the color to bleed through. So I'm going to show you how to do that. I've done a couple of pages. This one turned out a little darker than I had planned. And then this is the one I showed you originally. I love this bird cage on there. So in this one I'm using just a die cut, and you can cut this out with any die cut machine. And I'm just going to put it right over here in the corner. So again, we're going to use the same things we did before. Our plastic. This time I'm going to go with mostly green. It is a bit easier when working with these pigments to get it wet first. And then add the pigment. And I can move this around with a paintbrush and decide if I need more pigment. And I would like just a little bit of purple in here as well. These two colors go really well together. And I think I might go for a little shimmer here. Now this creates a very light shimmer, so you're not going to be all that visible. Can already see that purple wants to take over. So I don't want it to be quite that strong. Let's blot some of that up. Dilute it just a little bit more. There. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and lay our stencil down. Now the difference this time is I actually want to come back and add some pigment directly to the back of my die cut. In those other prints, what we're doing is we're allowing that color to seep through the cardstock, because cardstock is so absorbent, and then transfer really to our image by letting it soak through. But I don't want to do that this time because it's going to ruin the other page. So instead, I want there to already be ink on the back of that image so it'll transfer. And then we're going to lay it down on here, trying not to transfer the color to that page. Although I will tell you I'm pretty messy with my journals, so it don't really bother me all that much. see how we did here. Oh, look at that. I love just a little purple on the edge there, but I can still see my image. Okay, so I'm going to put this off to the side. I could actually get a whole nother print from that if I wanted to. In fact, I may do that real quick. But I want to kind of mop up some of this ink. Before it kind of gets all over the place. So now I lightened this up a little bit, and that allows this to stand out even more. So that's how you do it inside an art journal, where you don't want it to kind of seep through the back side. You need to make sure that you have extra pigment directly onto that die cut so it'll transfer it. Now, I am okay with my journals being messy and there being some transfer of color. That's not a big deal to me. So if it is to you, you'll want to protect the other pages so that they so there isn't color transfer. It doesn't really bother me. I use many of the same colors throughout my journals, so they kind of all work together, and I kind of like the messiness. So, and I can see I already have pigment over here. I literally could just activate that a little bit with some water, and I could add in just a little bit of this. We're going to get this to run down our page. That purple is so intense. Love it. Okay, so just having a little fun. As I have said before, I want to soak some of this up. My pages often start with a random background and a quote. And that's it. That's where I start. That's my starting spot. So I like a really crazy random background. Gets my creative juices going. Come back in here. Make a little bit more of a marbled effect. Webbing, love that. So now I got a couple pages out of there. The other thing I love about these pigment powders is there's a lot of underlying colors in there. So when you get them wet, it's not just the purples. I see blues and greens and pinks in there. They're just so beautiful to work with, but they do make a mess. So I'm going to clean up here, and then we'll kind of overview everything that we did. Okay, so let's go over what we got here. These were the first two prints we made with this beautiful stencil right here. I love how now it's colored. Some of you might think, oh, well, the white over there kind of bugs me. It doesn't bug me because that's easily, I can color that back in. But I love the randomness of the rest of it. So if you want a print like this, got to have a lot of water on there. If you want something that's a little more subtle, a little less water. What you're trying to do is to get it to soak through the back. So that's how you know it's done. The more it soaks through, the more complete your page will be filled up with color. Now I think this would make a beautiful card background. And again, I have a template for that too. I can kind of move it around. I think that would be really stunning for a card background. So we did that one. Here's the blue one. Again, love this one with spray ink. I love how that turned out. Can't wait because I'm seeing a tag in that one for sure. And then we worked on the journal page. And remember how I said, oh, I think I can get a print out of that still? And there's the print from it. as well as the die cut itself. Now you can't see this in the video, but it does have a shimmeriness to it because I used that glimmer mist, a homemade glimmer pearlizing mist. And again, it doesn't bother me that it's not all the way colored in. I can easily do that myself. And then we also did some art journaling pages. This is that last one, and at the very end I smushed it shut to kind of transfer some of that green onto the other side. So but we have our image here. Subtle, it's interesting, it's something for me to build upon. So yeah, it makes for a messy art journaling page, but I like that. So if you have any questions about anything I did here, please be sure to let me know. I'm always happy to help. This is a messy project, so get out the paper towels, make sure you protect your work surface and your clothes, and have at it. See what kind of prints you can make with your spray inks or watercolor paints or watercolor pigments, whatever it is that you have on hand. You can make some really stunning looks with your paper stencils and die cuts. Again, if you have any questions, please be sure to let me know. I'm Drury Parks with Everyday Moodlings, and I'll see you next time.